back to Lead One Podcast. I've got the crew with us this morning, Brandon, France, and Sam Buck.
What up?
We have, guys, we have got a treat for you this week. We are joined this morning by Dr. Roberta Hosky. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me.
We've got Roberta in the studio with us, all the way from New Haven, Connecticut. For those of you that don't know her, just a brief introduction. She's a real estate broker, author of the book Poverty Curse Broken, and media personality. She's the president and CEO of Outreach Realty Servicing and Outreach School of Real Estate, as well as the 1,000 Black Families National Homeownership Program. She's also the founder of International Millionaire Mindset Sisterhood.
Mm-hmm.
So listen, we are so glad that you're with us this morning, and can't wait to talk about the poverty curse and then more importantly breaking that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to start with what is the poverty curse, or maybe mindset is another word for that.
Mm-hmm. So the poverty curse or the poverty mindset, whichever way you want to look at it, it is something that many people battle. Some people battle it knowing that they battle it, and some people battle the poverty curse and not know what it is. So basically, anytime you are not living to the way that you know you can live, if you're living under a life of limitations, that's part of poverty. Anytime you have lack, opposite of poverty is wealth, right? Anytime there's lack, that's poverty. But we say mindset because what I've learned in my life as I was on a journey of breaking the poverty curse is that we as humans are very powerful. As we think, as the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. And so our thoughts have power. So people who are in poverty, they have a poverty mindset. People who are wealthy have a wealth mindset. It's just a way of thinking that produces results in our life.
Okay, so what is your advice on changing that way of thinking?
One, no one, and this is why I love what we're doing here on this podcast. I love what you guys are doing, illuminating leadership and asking these questions that we're having, that like today, how can you change it? What I know for sure is that there's no one that can change something that they don't see. It's impossible to do that. So the podcast like you're doing today is illuminating the people who may have the poverty mindset. First, you got to recognize that there's something wrong here. You have to first recognize, you know what? I don't know why I want to be a millionaire. I want to own houses. I want to be financially free. I want to sign my own paychecks. I have the ability to do it. Why have I not done it? Right? And so you got to start asking yourself those hard questions, and then be real with yourself, and then listen to the inner conversation that you have. Mindset is invisible. There is a whole battleground going on in everybody's mind. It's like, I remember the cartoons growing up. You had the good voice over here and that bad voice over here. If you can see that in your head, then that's exactly what's going on in our mind. We have those thoughts of wealth and abundance and being who we really are destined to be. And then you have that voice over here saying, you know what, you're not right for this, or you're not educated enough, or look at your family, you're black, come on, you slice up your verbs, you're not fit for this. And so it's an internal battle. So in order to win, Drew, the battle of your life, you must first win the battle of your mind. And so that's what we have to do. We have to, number one, realize there's a whole conversation going on, and it's involuntary. Nobody's in here just saying, oh, let me just talk to myself. Like, this is involuntary. But you have to realize it. And then you have to stop the negative conversations that you're having and substitute the negativity with positivity. And then move on those things, move on those emotions.
So let's maybe back up just a second.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you come from very humble beginnings,
Yes.
from what I know at least.
Mm-hmm.
Was a question I have for you is, was there a specific moment that opened your eyes to there's more, or that you could break the mold?
Absolutely. There was a time, and in life, and this is why I want our listeners to know that in life, some of the worst times and the hardest times in your life is at the break of the best changes and the most illuminating time of your life. It's all on how you look at it. You know, again, that goes to poverty mindset and wealth mindset. The wealth will always see the positive in any situation. But here's the situation. I was recently removed from the shelter, and it's in my book, Poverty Curse Broken. And being in a homeless shelter as a teenager is not a good thing, and that's where I was at. Very emotional, very feeling abandoned, you know, crying, and there's a lot of things that go on in those shelters. And I never forget my godparents came and took me out the shelter, and they came and they signed me out. And I was telling my cousin Brandon, I still get emotional when I tell my story because it's so real, even though it was so a while ago. They came and took me out the shelter, and they brought me home with them. Now, I'm a girl from the projects. When they was really projects, now they look cute. And they don't have roaches no more. Or water bugs. But they took me out of the shelter, and they brought me into their home. And you know what, Drew? That was the first time I was inside a single-family house. I had never been inside a single-family house. I've only known apartments. I've only known projects. I've only known that. And I never knew that you could live in a house that had a bathroom in it, in your bedroom. Wow. I never saw that. I never knew that you could walk inside a closet. And my godmother took me, and she was intentional about showing me what I've never seen. And I remember her saying to me, she says, honey, you do not have to be a product of your environment. You can do whatever you put your mind to. Now, the other thing that is so powerful is that we relate. People relate. And so if it had been someone, let's say someone that was already, you know, maybe a white person or someone, a Chinese person, someone that wasn't black, someone that wasn't from the hood, someone that didn't experience the poverty that I did, and they did this for me, it wouldn't have been as impactful. Because in my mind, I was like, oh, that's them, not me.
Right.
But now here this family is, and they're from the projects, right? And he's from Brooklyn, my godfather from Brooklyn. And they took me in. And yeah, first time walking in the house, it did something to me.
And what age was that?
I had to be about 14.
Wow. So, Roberta, I have a question that is in line with what you just said. Do you feel that people have to hit rock bottom before they affect change in their lives?
Anyone that's listening to this podcast, no. But prior to, I think people may think that. I know it's a choice. And this is why I'm saying anyone listening to this podcast, anyone that's listening, it is truly a choice that many people think you don't have. So the answer, you don't have to hit rock bottom. But do most people hit rock bottom? Yes. It's a choice still, though.
One of the questions that I have is it's in line. I did some reading in your book, and
okay.
So a lot of it, you really did tell a great story. I think about the building of who you are. So I think a lot of times in poverty, you're in survival mode.
Yes.
So what was your real switch? Like, what was the moment? Was that the moment, or is it another moment that switch of survival just left and you started to want to strive?
And you know what? That's an amazing, great question. Here it is. Your mind is so powerful. And even in writing my book, I suppressed. I didn't realize how much I suppressed until I wrote the book. Drew, do you know I had to fact check my own book? That's how much I suppressed. The part about being in a homeless shelter in my aunt's house next door. I literally got in the car to look at the shelter and look at the house next door. So your mind can suppress, right? It can suppress things because of survival mode. Now, what happened is, it was my son. If you read my book, it was my son because of the level of poverty, right? His father was a hustler. He was a drug dealer. Like, My first boyfriend was killed gunpoint from my house. And here I am giving birth to this little brown boy. Like, what did I have to offer him? I had nothing to offer him. I had nothing except generational poverty. And I looked into his future. And so for parents and to people who are listening to this podcast, look in the eyes of your children and look into their future, and you will see it's directly related to you. And because I was able to see that, I couldn't give up, because in my heart of a heart, I felt that if I gave up on him, that I would lose him to what I knew my life was about, which is plagues and poverty. So I was in a hustle mentality. So there was no plan B. The problem is that we give ourselves too many plan Bs. There was no plan B, plan A, and that was to figure out how to break this poverty curse over my son, which meant I had to go to school, so I'm in a hustle mentality. It was no excuses. I didn't have a car. So I was catching the bus, a hustle mentality. The bus got too expensive, so I had to save for a bicycle, a hustle mentality. No babysitter, put him in the back of the classroom with his peanut butter in his little cars, a hustle mentality. We give too many excuses right now. I don't got a babysitter, I stay home. That's an excuse, that's a reason to fail. And my mindset was like, that is not acceptable. And so that hustle mentality followed me all the way when I made my first investment. And that investment that I made, it wasn't that I was like, oh, I want to get into real estate. I want to be this real estate guru. It was survival. I couldn't afford the apartment that I bought the 4-family house in. And people think you need money to buy a 4-family house. That's not it. You need the strategy. And so I had that hustle mentality. And then now it's like I wanted to, not just to have a 4-family house. I needed a backyard. So it's a hustle mentality. Hustle, hustle, hustle. I needed to be home with my daughter. So I needed a hustle mentality. I couldn't work in New York. So I hustle until I built this empire, and I'm still hustling. And it came when WFSB came and did a rags to riches story on me. My birthday's Christmas Day. And they needed a feel-good story, and they heard about this girl. And they came to my office, and they did a story about my life and how I was impacting so many people in the real estate industry and in mindset. And they needed a feel-good story. And when the person at the interviewer said, when they left, the name of the story was New Haven Mother Builds Lucrative Business. And I was okay with that, because until then I'm like blending in, but I'm in a hustle mentality. But when I woke up in the morning, my phone is like ting, and they were like, congratulations, nice story. It's like ting. I was like, oh, that's good. Ting, and another one was like, oh, that's what's up. I saw you last night on the news. Like, oh, okay, so I'm getting this love. And then I get a ting with the question marks. Like, what's that? Then I get a ting with, oh, wow, really? And I was like, what's wrong with these people? Then they send a screenshot, and it says, New Haven Mother becomes a millionaire by investing in real estate. That's 2 different titles. I was in hustle mentality. And can I tell you that I didn't even really sit back and realize the impact until that article. And until when I walked out my door after that article, being swarmed by people asking me, how did I do it? And I was forced to really feel like, give them an answer, how did I do it? And that's how I came up with mindset. Not because I was a good person, there's a lot of good people out here. Not because I was saved and go to church, there's a lot of people who go to church. It was mindset. So that switch, that hustle mentality, one, it never fell off. But I didn't recognize what I built until after it was built. And maybe I look at it and say, maybe I believe that was God's way of keeping me humble. And at the same time, me and God had this thing going on, right? I'm like, I knew I made millions, but it was between me and God. It was like he pulled the cover off. But I'm okay with it right now because I understand it's for such a time as this. So I've never left that hustle. It's just, I just didn't know what I did until I looked back and was like, what? Yeah, that's me. Yeah. That's pretty dope. Let me pinch myself. Right. And now let me go buy the house so I can stop worrying about what people think about me. Then I just did what I did.
Yeah. On our last podcast, we talked about success versus significance.
Mm-hmm.
And, in that, we are striving for ourselves to be better, but you don't know who you touch along the way.
Yes.
And it sounds like on your journey, personally, you've touched so many people outside of, on the outside, without even realizing that.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that as far as the the people you've touched, and what would be some nuggets you'd like to leave them with?
My cousin and I was having this conversation. I said, one is a great responsibility, and that I don't take lightly now. Now that I'm intentional about everything I do, I'm not just haphazard. I'm laser focused. I'm not taking every interview. My cousin called, I jump on a plane, I'm here. That's different. I mean, he's his family. I'll do what I have to do. But I don't take any interview. I don't just do that. I'm intentional. And so with that being intentional, I feel like it's a responsibility. And now I have this responsibility to be the light. See, if I was, and I just have to go here, if I was a white man who was given a silver spoon in your mouth, I wouldn't, you could look at me and look past me, but when I look like you, when I come from you, when I come from the bottom, and you can't look past it. And it's like in your face. So I have a responsibility. And so now with that responsibility, I have this new mindset. And the mindset is, this world, we're all in this world for a purpose. Purpose is plural. And I will not, I repeat, not leave this world until this world knows my name, and until I know that I have impacted as many people I can humanly and spiritually impact that I cannot number. So I will not be a blip on a radar. I will not be that, because I'm born for purpose. I rose from the ashes for purpose. So it's bigger. I'm not just, oh, he, I'm not. No. I got a purpose, and that's why I'm here. So I don't take it lightly.
Roberta, I want to back up to something you said earlier about having your first child, looking into his eyes and realizing that you were going to provide more for him. We were talking the other day. I feel like sometimes people use their children as motivation. I think other times they use them as excuses.
Or a crutch.
Right. And I think there's a balance. Brandon always relates everything back to family, and those that have listened know he's got 5 girls. I've got a 2-year-old son. What advice do you have for somebody who's trying to maintain that balance? Because I think as a parent, there's some people that think, okay, well, I'm spending a lot of time at home with my child. I'm being a good mother, but they're not providing the lifestyle because of that. And you didn't allow excuses to get in the way. You mentioned taking him to class with you and putting him in the back of the room. So what is that balance?
Here's the thing. That's a good question, but there's not a straightforward answer for that, because we are a conglomerate of the environment of which we're in. This is why Brandon says family. People say, well, what made you different from your brothers and sisters? And having to provide, and you're just a provider, you provide. That's all you're going to do. If you weren't taught about, you're only going to pull out what you have inside of you. So again, the people who are listening to this podcast, you're illuminating your thought process. So you do have to understand that there's a balance, and who is to determine what is a good parent? There's no blueprint for that. There's no book for that either. So balance, that is not a straightforward answer, except to understand that we should set our children up to be better than us. Our children should excel much more than us. So if you're not intentional about teaching your children well, by default, you're going to teach them poverty. It's just a default. Do nothing and poverty will repeat itself. That's it. So if you look from that mindset, then you do what you got to do for it. But if you do nothing, poverty going to repeat itself.
All right, so say you made the switch. All right, you got yourself out of poverty mindset. How do you keep yourself out of there?
Good.
Like, what are the things that you did to keep yourself from getting sunk back into that place that's so common to us?
That's good. That comfort zone. I call it a comfort zone, your broke zone. Your comfort zone is your broke zone. Anytime you're comfortable, something's broken. And so you always, I live my life in two extremes all the time. I got a whole lot of major stuff happening. I got a whole bunch of major crazy stuff happening. So at extreme, so it keeps me balanced. But I envision, if you envision this, I'm a visual person. I'm garden. I'm not a gardener. I do not have a green thumb, but I do know enough to know that if you garden, you have to pluck out the weeds. And if you pluck out the weeds, imagine the garden to be your mind. And you pluck out the weeds because now you're saying, I'm going to develop this positive mindset. I'm going to develop this millionaire mindset. I'm going to create wealth, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to break generational curses. I'm going to do this. So you're plucking out weeds. Now, if you don't go back to the garden and continually pluck the weeds out, the weeds are going to grow back. That's just natural. And this is what happens in our mind. So it's a constant thing. I constantly remind myself. I do affirmations. I pray. I remind myself that I'm here for a purpose. I remind myself that, you know, this wealth and this abundance thing that I'm living in, it ain't for me. This is for an example of what God can do, as an example for what people need. So I remind myself that this is a daily, not even daily, Brandon, it is a constant thing that I have to do all the time, always have to be there. Because like I said, you have these thoughts. They don't go away, you just manage them. You know, it don't go away because your past is your past. It's just what's dominating. So it is a conscious decision every single day. It's a conscious decision.
Roberta, I know for me, as things have changed over the course of my life, oftentimes my circle has changed. And for better or for worse at times. And that's difficult. You and I haven't talked about this, but
yes,
I'm venturing to say that you probably are not associated with all the same people you were back at 17 years old. And I think sometimes people that maybe are stuck in, whether it's the poverty mindset or whatever cycle they're in, that's part of what's hard to break away, because you're typically not getting a lot of support from those people. How important is your circle?
Your circle is extremely important. The amount of money that you make is not going to be far different from the circle that you surround. I think it's like a $10,000 difference from the circle. Look at the people you hang around and then check their amounts. You're going to be in that realm as it relates to money. Also, as it relates to mindset, you know, negativity is contagious. And so if you're trying to have a positive outlook on life, you're trying to make this shift, you can't be around negative people. And unfortunately, you're going to have people who you thought were your friends, and then they really are secret haters, and they want to live your life. And so they're going to be who they were designed to be. Even Jesus had Judases. So is my circle the same? Absolutely not. I had a friend that I thought was a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, and then she said somebody told her she was Gal. She's like, I don't want to be Gal. I was like, and I'm giving her 5. I was like, you Gal? Yeah, I'm old. I'm like, my circle has definitely gotten smaller, but it's gotten larger. And let me explain. This is the birthing of the millionaire mindset sisterhood. What I knew for sure is that if anyone, and being focused with my purpose, if anyone was going to be successful, you had to be in an environment conducive for success. And so I decided to create a sisterhood, faith-based, because that's all I know. Faith-based sisterhood devoted to breaking what we call the curse of poverty over our lives and the lives of our loved ones. So we share this mentality that I'm talking about. We teach it. I teach the mentality that we talk about. And so my circle, you know, people who come over and hang out at my house, yeah, that's tight. But, oh, my circle is big. Yeah, but I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Your circle, your environment is important.
So here's a good question I feel like people need to hear. There's a lot of people who live in abundance and lead out of poverty. And I think poverty, the mindset of poverty is about necessity, survival. There are a lot of people who lead groups of people and keep them around because they need them, not because they necessarily have the people they want. They
kind of like a government creating dependency.
Creating dependency.
Power in that.
Like in our industry, a lot of times we lead people who we normally wouldn't even hire. Because we need them, so to speak. How important is it to stand your ground and know what it is that you need and you want as a leader, and not lead out of necessity, but lead and be comfortable with going through the storm and getting to where you need to be.
I would almost say that anyone that leads from poverty doesn't have a heart of a leader. There's a difference. You can lead because you have people following you, but that doesn't mean you have the heart, because a leader creates leaders. If you're but you create leaders. That's what you do. You never hold a person down. And so that's where I would kind of, I would say that, but it is necessary to be transparent. I think, to show what it really took to get to where you are. I think you don't want to paint a picture of, oh, everything is good and I'm here and this is beautiful at the top of all of this stuff, where you don't show the struggle. And that's why people love my book, Poverty Cursed Broken, because I showed the struggle. And let me tell you, that's probably a quarter of the struggle.
Saying people won't read 1,200 pages.
Well, we're going to have a sequel. But it is important for leaders. And so if there are any leaders that are listening to this podcast, I'm going to say you have to lead as an example with transparency and humility. And to always give from a positive standpoint, not from a negative, from a wealth perspective, a wealth mindset, not a poverty mindset. But leaders create leaders.
And so my follow-up to that is that, because you said from obviously positivity, right?
Yes, from positivity.
And one thing about poverty is that you expect failure and rejection. Poverty mindset, most people in poverty expect people outside of their immediate circle to reject them or for them to fail at something because of where they're from or whatever.
Yep.
They expect that. But how important is it, like you said, to overcome, and what mechanisms can you use for those people who are close to you? Because that could be the most detrimental thing. In reading your book, a lot of the things that seemed like it hit the most coming off the page was those people that were close. That failure, that rejection sometimes hits a lot harder. Not because it's like you expect it, but it's still like, talk to people about overcoming that and using that as fuel, I guess.
So one is when you are in a battle of life, you have to realize it's you and God in it. It's not these people, right? And so their opinions cannot stop you. Their opinions cannot hinder you. The only thought process that can stop you is your own. That's it. So if your thought process is rejection and you move off of rejection, you're going to get rejected. And then you're like, see, I told you so. But that's because you moved off of your thought process of rejection. So it's about shifting your paradigm. And it's about shifting, saying, you know what, their thoughts, I'm going to say, okay, and I'm going to be respectful. But they're not going to stop me from doing what I believe in my heart to do. It has to be an internal switch. It has to come from the inside out.